The bedroom is dim, the air thick with unspoken thoughts. Taehyeong, a direct hand to everyone else, calls for Sehui's attention, his voice firm but with an undertone she can't quite place. She notices how stressed he seems today and raises an eyebrow, wondering what's going on in his head. He exhales sharply, running a hand through his dark hair. It's not like him to admit stress so easily. She nods, acknowledging the unspoken words. A brief silence fills the room, heavy but comfortable. They don't need to say much more. Without warning, they're drawn together, the space between them closing quickly. Their lips meet in a quiet, almost wordless exchange, a simple moment, but enough to clear the fog in her mind, like the sky after rain. When they part, a hint of sadness lingers in Sehui's eyes. It's subtle, but impossible to miss. Maybe Taehyeong notices, maybe he doesn't, but the night moves on, pulling them into a world where, for now, nothing else matters. Morning arrives, and Sehui's phone won't stop ringing. The sound cuts through the quiet like an alarm bell, dragging her out of sleep. She blinks groggily, barely processing it, before reaching for the phone. A quick glance at the screen reveals multiple missed calls, all from one person. Her mom. Sehui frowns, confusion settling in. Her mother is in Vietnam for a business trip, yet somehow, she's still managing to keep tabs on her like a professional spy. Does she ever take a break? Is there a hidden camera in the house? At this point, it wouldn't even surprise her. She sits up slowly, noticing a note left on the table. Taehyeong must have slipped out early, not waking her. Typical. He moves like a ninja in the mornings, while she's more of a sleep-deprived zombie. Still, the missed calls weigh on her. The constant checking, the pressure, it feels like it's closing in on her. Her mom doesn't even need to be here to make her feel like there's an invisible leash around her neck. Her mind drifts back to a conversation with her Eoni. The details are a blur, like a fading dream, but one thing stands out, those chilling words. You'll be set free once you've served your purpose. The memory sends a shiver down her spine. What does that even mean? The more she thinks about it, the heavier it sits in her chest. Some people get encouraging talks from their elders. Sehui? She gets cryptic lines straight out of a villain's playbook. Reality can be tough. Sehui steps outside, and the cold air hits her like a reality check. She shivers instantly, regretting every life choice that led her to underestimate the weather. The note in her hand crinkles slightly as she tightens her grip, her gaze dropping to the familiar handwriting. Taehyeong. She thinks about him for a moment, his sharp mind, his unreadable expressions, the way he somehow manages to be both infuriating and admirable. He's definitely a special one. So special, in fact, that she's jealous. Everything seems to work in his favor, while she feels like she's constantly walking a tightrope. Meanwhile, back at the office, gossip spreads like wildfire. Today's hot topic? Director Han. Some say he's the vice chairman's illegitimate son, whispering like they've just uncovered the plot twist of a drama. But despite all the talk, Taehyeong remains unshaken, walking through the building with the confidence of someone who's heard it all before. Perfection is the standard he sets, and people can't help but be impressed. The men acknowledge his work ethic with nods of approval, while the ladies, well, let's just say a few dreamy sighs escape whenever his name is mentioned. It's almost unfair how effortlessly he commands attention. Sehui throws a glance toward the office workers deep in discussion, catching snippets of their conversation. She doesn't need to hear everything to know what they're saying. Taehyeong's progress in the company is undeniable. He's a spectacle to behold, the kind of person people either admire or envy. She exhales, shaking her head slightly. What a frustratingly impressive man. Taehyeong's rise in a wealthy household is nothing short of impressive. He's held his place not through luck or connections, but through sheer conviction, grit, and relentless hard work. Nothing was ever handed to him. He carved out his own space and made sure no one could take it away. Whenever Sehui crosses paths with him, that fact weighs on her like a heavy coat she never asked to wear. Standing next to him, she feels small, like a candle flickering beside a spotlight. She knows it's not his fault, but that doesn't make the feeling any easier to ignore. Compared to him, she's weak, and she hates that she knows it. Her phone buzzes again, cutting through her thoughts. This time, she actually answers. The moment her mother's voice comes through the speaker, reality comes crashing back like a wave she forgot she was standing in. The truth is suffocating, she isn't her own person. She exists under her mother's watchful eye, a puppet whose strings are pulled at every turn. It's exhausting, but what choice does she have? Things weren't always like this. At least, not to this extent. 1 month ago, everything changed. 1 month ago, she crossed paths with director Han. And since then? Nothing in her world has been the same. Taehyeong stands on the tennis court, catching his breath after a long match. His friend, already leaning against the net like he's been exhausted for hours, shakes his head and tells him to take a break, but he smirks but obliges. As they cool down, the conversation, as always, drifts to something unrelated: women. His friend teases him about spending all his time on the court without thinking about investing in an actual person, like a girl. Taehyeong doesn't bother looking up, responding with a simple "no time for that." His friend sighs, clearly unimpressed, and calls him the classic workaholic, always tied up in his job. Taehyeong just agrees, not bothering to explain himself. Instead, he shifts the conversation to Director Kang, mentioning he hasn't seen him lately. His friend perks up, eager to gossip, and reveals that Kang is around often but always disappears when he's not playing, apparently off with someone special. Taehyeong raises an eyebrow, intrigued. His friend adds that Kang keeps his relationship super private, only a select few know about it. Interesting. The two men walk along the court, chatting easily. One talks, the other listens, but in the back of Taehyeong's mind, a thought nags at him: how different things must be for people who make room for something beyond work. He slows his pace, the thought bothering him. After a brief silence, he asks his friend if he's being spied on, hinting at reports being sent to Director Kang. His friend raises an eyebrow and jokes that Taehyeong isn't that interesting. Taehyeong nods, slightly satisfied, and lets the matter drop as they continue walking through the gym. The sounds of weights clanking and treadmills whirring fill the air, but then a voice cuts through, high-pitched, desperate, and clearly in distress. Taehyeong glances over to see a personal trainer standing next to a bench, arms crossed, watching his client struggle. And that client? Sehui. She looks seconds away from passing out, practically begging for mercy. Her legs tremble, her face twisted in pain, but her trainer? Totally unmoved. He briefly shuts his eyes, then exhales like he's searching for patience before telling her to push harder, as if she's not already on the verge of collapsing. Sehui lets out a sound somewhere between a groan and a whimper, clearly regretting every decision that brought her here. But then her trainer says something that catches Taehyeong's attention. He tells her that if she quits now, he can't answer to her mother. He looks terrified, as though disappointing Sehui's mother would be a criminal offense. Taehyeong watches, intrigued. A mother so intimidating that even a trainer is scared of her? That's something. The trainer then stops, arms crossed, and gives Sehui a long, suspicious look, asking if she went out drinking again. Sehui, still struggling to catch her breath, stays silent, and her trainer groans, frustrated. He can't believe how hard he's worked to keep her on track, only for her to make things more difficult for him. Taehyeong is spiraling now, pacing like a man preparing for his last words before facing Sehui's mother. If she finds out about this, his career, and possibly his entire existence, could be over. Meanwhile, Sehui, despite clearly being in pain, keeps apologizing between gasps for air, begging to sit down. Taehyeong hasn't taken his eyes off her once. There's something about the scene that keeps him rooted to the spot. She looks like she might burst into tears at any moment, but she's still pushing herself to keep going. It doesn't make sense. Why push this hard? The question keeps looping in his mind as he watches her, unable to look away. Taehyeong's phone rings, snapping him out of his thoughts. He answers, "It's Junho." They confirm the materials are ready, and they'll meet at the entrance of the HJ Hotel Sports Center. As the call ends, Taehyeong's gaze drifts back to Sehui. She's still struggling, still pleading with her trainer, but she's still pushing forward despite it all. He watches, his expression unreadable. Taehyeong recalls his friend's words from earlier on the tennis court. Maybe they were right, it's been too long since he's had any romantic involvement, and perhaps that's why he keeps watching Sehui. The thought lingers as he stands there, wondering if he should do something about it. After all, they haven't even officially met yet. What direction will their story take? At HJ Fashion, Sehui finishes her business English class, leaving the room buzzing with appreciation. Her students clearly enjoyed the session, and one of them, a guy with an easy smile, approaches her afterward. He offers her a cup of coffee along with more compliments, which she accepts with a grateful smile. He notices a slight strain in her voice and asks if she's been busy lately. Sehui nods, explaining that last week was packed with classes, leaving her voice a little worn out. He chuckles, comparing it to surviving a verbal battle. He then asks if she works exclusively with HJ Fashion, and Sehui confirms she does for now. He raises an eyebrow, intrigued by the "for now" part, and she explains that she follows where the opportunities take her. Impressed, he comments that she's a smart move, especially since she's not only fluent in English but also works as a teacher and interpreter. Sehui laughs, sharing her tip for ordering coffee in English: don't panic and don't say a espresso. As the conversation continues, the admiration in the guy's voice is clear. Sehui remains humble, thinking she's just doing what she does best, but moments like these remind her of how far she's come. The guy pauses, still processing something. He asks if she's really 28, scanning her face like he's trying to find a wrinkle. He laughs, joking that she looks like someone who still gets carded when buying cough syrup. Sehui laughs and shakes her head, but he's not finished. He jokes that she's defying the aging process, calling it next-level sorcery, while others seem to age like avocados. He quickly recovers and suggests they grab a drink sometime so he can keep being amazed by her. He mentions how the HR team has become her fan club after the last company dinner and that they'd love to see her again. Sehui, not turning him down, takes a slow sip of her coffee before nodding. She tells him to just let her know when, and his excitement levels skyrocket, as if he's just been given exclusive access to something. Sehui watches him, amused, before taking another sip. She responds warmly, but her eyes tell a different story. Beneath the friendly conversation, her mother's expectations loom like an ever-present shadow. No matter how much she achieves, Sehui never feels truly free. Her image, her success, everything feels like something she doesn't fully own. It's a reality she's had to accept, even if she doesn't like it. Her mother, a perfectionist in every sense, controlled every part of her life, from her appearance to her choices. She remembers the shots she had to take as a child, to keep her body from growing too tall or curvy, all part of her mother's idea of perfection. As Sehui walks, balancing her coffee and files, her mind drifts back to those memories. The world sees her as flawless, but no one knows the cost behind it. People turn to stare as she passes, their eyes lingering on the striking figure she's become. Flawless, poised, exactly as intended. But none of them know the blueprint behind it. No one stops to wonder what it took to craft this version of her. Would they still be impressed if they knew? Her phone buzzes. Then again. And again. With a sigh, she shifts her coffee cup, freeing a hand to check the messages. It's from her team leader in HJ Fashion's design team too, asking her to check her email for an urgent update. No time to dwell on the past, back to business. She pulls up the email, scans it quickly. K Magazine. A moment later, the message is gone, deleted without hesitation. An offer, no doubt. A chance to branch out, expand her reach. But Sehui doesn't bite. Whether it's her own lack of interest or her mother's influence whispering in the background, she doesn't stop to figure it out. All she knows is that, for now, she's staying exactly where she is. Looking out at the terrace, Sehui quickly realizes her plan for a peaceful coffee break is not happening. Every seat is taken. Not even a tiny corner is left for her to squeeze into. So much for that idea. With a small sigh, she decides to head home instead. Meanwhile, Director Han is deep in conversation with a few colleagues. One of them, probably feeling brave today, suggests he take a break before working himself into the ground. Director Han just scoffs. Rest? Not his style. With a smirk, he teases them, enjoying the idea of slacking off. The guys laugh, shaking their heads. Classic Director Han, always moving, always pushing forward. From a distance, Sehui watches the scene. Her eyes linger on the director, curiosity piqued. Is this the same man Mr. Jong had gone on and on about at the last staff dinner? Sehui recalls how Mr. Jong had raved about the director's performance. Apparently, since day one, his evaluations had been off the charts. In just 3 years, he went from assistant manager to manager, and now, here he is, the director. Fast. Efficient. Unstoppable. If Director Han were just another average guy, someone might have tried to trip him up, slow down his rapid rise. But he wasn't just good, he was perfect. Untouchable. The kind of employee that makes everyone else question their choices. Naturally, the staff respects him. How could they not? Even Mr. Jong, who isn't easily impressed, has nothing but high praise for him. When a guy like that gives compliments, you know it means something. Sehui watches him from a distance, curiosity in her eyes. A man like him, so polished, so respected, could he manipulate others like her mother does? The thought lingers, especially with rumors about his ties to Vice Chairman Kang. Some say he's the man's illegitimate son, but it's all just gossip with no solid proof. Still, as she watches him now, he seems normal. Relaxed. Smiling as he chats with colleagues, completely at ease. If he were a manipulator like her mother, he'd be the worst kind, the type who hides behind warmth and perfection to deceive everyone. That kind of manipulation would be crueler than anything she's seen. It would be disappointing, really, if he turned out to be someone like that. In just a few seconds, Sehui's thoughts rush by, but they leave their mark. Whether the director is as perfect as he seems or just another expert manipulator remains to be seen. As she walks by, something about her catches his attention. He can't place it at first, but a nagging feeling creeps in. Could she be the young woman from the gym the other day? It's a wild guess, but he's convinced. His intuition must be on point. Without missing a beat, he says a quick goodbye to his colleagues and heads in her direction. Coincidence? Fate? Who knows? Sehui, meanwhile, is holding a handful of things, files, books, coffee, looking like she's one misstep away from a disaster. With each step, her nerves start creeping in. Maybe she should have taken a few more minutes to finish her coffee. But no, here she is, rushing, lost in thought. And then it happens. A slip. For a split second, panic floods her mind. Is this how it all ends? A dramatic workplace accident, papers flying everywhere? Nope. Before she can even process it, a hand grabs her, steadying her just in time. She blinks, heart racing, and looks up. Of course. It's the director. Their paths cross in the most unexpected way. Director Han has just saved Sehui from a painful, humiliating fall. She turns to see him, and her mind short-circuits. Of all people, it's him, Director Han. Shock floods her, and before she can think, she blurts out an apology, still trying to process what just happened. Her heart races, but her feet are busy trampling her work ID. Director Han spots it immediately and points it out, telling her to move her foot. Mortified, she lifts it quickly. He picks up the ID, dusts it off, and hands it to her. Simple, right? Except Sehui is holding onto her books and coffee, leaving no free hands. Without thinking, she asks him to clip it back on for her. He moves to do it but hesitates. The moment stretches just a little too long, and Sehui can feel her cheeks warming. Blushing? Really? But she still manages a quiet thank you. Director Han, however, is too distracted. He briefly scans her features, sharp, elegant. His gaze lowers, tracing the curve of her neckline. His eyes then drop to the ID in his hand, reading her name before finally letting it go. It all happens in a blink, yet something about it stays. A moment that sticks, almost refusing to leave. And the oddest thing? Just from one glance, her name, her face, the way she carries herself, he's already imagining more than just work-related stuff. A connection beyond the office accident, but sometimes, logic just takes a backseat. Sehui thanks him for helping out, and Director Han brushes it off like it's nothing before turning to leave. But something shifts. Not a huge change, but a tiny nudge forward. Baby steps. He checks his watch, but it's not the time he's really worried about. It's her. What just happened? Why did he stop like that? It's not like him to hesitate. Something about Sehui Yun threw him off. He can't pinpoint what, but one thing's for sure, she's now on his radar. He glances at his hand, the same one that just reached for her, steadied her, even clipped her ID. A smirk pulls at his lips. This feeling, it's strange, unexpected. But curiosity? That's something he knows all too well. And when Director Han is curious, you know it's serious. The real question now is, what's he going to do about it? Back in class, Sehui zones out, staring blankly at nothing. Then, bam! The director's face pops into her mind. Out of nowhere. She blinks, shakes it off. That was weird. And then, bam! It happens again. His face, his expression, clear as ever. What's going on? Before she can even wrap her head around it, someone's voice yanks her back to the present. She jolts, looking around. Turns out, the guy sitting in front of her has been trying to get her attention. With a grin, he casually mentions that the general manager is treating everyone to drinks at the T Hotel Sky Bar tonight. Hard liquor, good company, he asks if she's coming. Sehui blinks again. A staff dinner? It catches her off guard, and for some reason, she feels oddly shaken by it. Why? It's just a company thing, right? The guy at the office won't let it go. He's determined to get Sehui to join them, even though she keeps reminding him that she's not officially part of the team. But that doesn't stop him. Soon, the whole group is practically begging, throwing in over-the-top sighs and dramatic glances. Sehui forces a smile, but on the inside, she's weighing the consequences. Drinking isn't exactly on her list of smart moves. Alcohol means bloating, dull skin, and if her trainer or her mom finds out, well, that's a whole new level of trouble. But, in the end, she caves. She tells them she'll meet them there, promising to show up. The moment Sehui agrees, the room bursts into excitement. Cheers and high-fives fly around like she just signed $1 million deal. No one's even pretending to hide how thrilled they are. Looks like Sehui Yun is officially part of the team, whether she intended it or not. Dinner rolls around faster than expected, and the venue is a stunning, upscale restaurant. The kind of place that makes you feel like you've walked into a scene from a movie, soft lighting, chic design, everything just oozing sophistication. Everyone settles in, looking comfortable and ready for what promises to be a night to remember. The men pour a glass of premium alcohol for Director Han, and one of them raises a toast, praising Sehui for her work. They mention how impressive her class is and how it's the most popular in the company, clearly backing up the vice president's recommendation. Even if she's not there, it's hard not to be a little impressed by Sehui's accomplishments. She's definitely earned that fancy drink. Sehui, ever the humble one, smiles and thanks her boss for the kind words. She promises to keep giving her best, setting the tone for a night that feels full of good conversation and possible opportunities. Tonight, she's not just part of the team, she's got the spotlight. Quiet whispers circulate across the table as the women chat about Director Han. They keep their voices low, but the excitement is clear. Sehui glances over, taking a slow sip of her drink. One of the women laughs, admitting she dressed up extra nice just in case the director shows up. The other joins in, both of them sharing a quiet laugh, clearly in on some unspoken joke. His name is a hot topic. Sehui's noticed this in her short time with the staff. Talk about Director Han is practically constant. It's like he was born to be noticed, to be recognized. As she drinks, Sehui can't help but think more about it. What kind of man is he? There's something about him, something she can't quite put her finger on. He seems like the type who's never had to bow down to anyone. Ever. Unlike Seanjung Construction, where power dynamics are always at play, HJ Group is one of the top 10 companies in the business world. Director Han isn't just a big deal, he's a name. The kind of name that commands attention without even trying. As it stands, Sehui can't help but feel a twinge of jealousy toward Director Han. It's a bitter feeling, but it's there. She believes he'll never know what it feels like to be in her shoes, to wake up every day feeling like she's less than a bug, constantly stepping on invisible cracks in the floor just to keep herself from being crushed. That's how she feels, every single day. It's a sad, humbling realization. Before everything went to hell, before her world crumbled around her, Sehui had lost her sister, Jihui. The funeral was a blur, a sea of people singing praises about how much Chairman Yun had loved both her daughters. Even though Jihui was gone, Sehui was left to carry the weight of the world on her shoulders, especially when it came to her mother. They begged her not to worry her mother to keep up appearances. But in the end, her mother wasn't fazed. Business was always the priority. There she was, at the funeral, discussing the future of the organization with a mystery man. The man reassured her that Chairman Yun would soon be out of the picture and that Seanjung Construction would finally fall into their hands. It's a cold, calculated conversation in the middle of such a personal loss. But for Sehui, it's just another reminder of the world she's trapped in. Her mother orders Sehui to step on the scale, and despite her trembling hands and heart racing, Sehui obeys. Her mother informs her coldly, as she always does, that she must stay fit, follow her every command, because that's the only way to make them happy. Later, we see Sehui, desperate, banging on the door, pleading for her release, begging her mother to let her out. She then promises to never tip off a reporter as tears streaming down her face. She's still so young, so desperate. She knocks on the door, her hands bruised from the force. She calls out for her mother, but the response is nothing but dead silence. In that silence, a crushing realization hits. No one is coming. She's been locked away for so long, the outside world is beyond her reach. Help is an illusion, a far-off dream. She cries, her sobs echoing through the empty halls as she succumbs to depression. Her fate has been sealed. There's no escaping this. Sehui feels trapped in a world of manipulation and cruelty, where she's about to be handed off to a man she doesn't even know. The weight of it all is overwhelming. Mr. Jong notices her unsteady state, his concerned gaze catching her attention. He gently points out that she doesn't look great, probably having had a bit too much to drink. Sehui forces a small smile, trying to cover up the discomfort in her body. She reassures him that she's fine, just needing a moment. She plans to step out to the ladies' room to collect herself. Mr. Jong, still worried, offers to walk her there, noticing how unsteady she is. She chuckles softly, turning him down with a quick, appreciative smile, promising she'll be fine. With that, she turns to leave. As she steps forward, she can't help but think about how sweet Mr. Jong has been, always looking out for her. It's a rare kindness, especially in an environment like this, where people tend to keep their distance. But there's a catch, she can't let herself entertain such thoughts, can't even consider someone like him. Not with her mother's suffocating grip on her life, pulling the strings of every decision, every move Sehui makes. It's tragic, really. The idea of having someone by her side, someone who cares for her, seems like a distant fantasy, one that her reality can't afford. To break free from this relentless control, Sehui would need someone far more powerful than her parents. She'd need a force strong enough to crush the world her mother has built around her. Her steps start to feel heavier as she staggers down the hall, the weight of her thoughts mixing with the effects of the alcohol. With each step, her vision blurs and her head spins. The dizziness intensifies, and she realizes just how much she's had to drink. She tries to steady herself, but the world around her is spinning, and it takes all her effort just to stay on her feet. She can't deny it now, she's drunk. A little too much, actually. But as she stumbles on, she wonders if this feeling is just the drink or if it's something else, something deeper, something she can't shake off no matter how hard she tries. Back to the idea of a companion, Sehui can't help but think about how much she'd need someone who could stand up to her parents, someone strong enough to handle their control, someone who could push back when her mother's influence takes over. Someone like Director Han. The man, the myth, the legend himself. Sehui briefly lets herself imagine what it would be like to have him by her side. Could he be that person? Fate is crazy sometimes, isn't it? Just as she's lost in thought, dreaming of a future she could never have, she bumps right into him. It happens so suddenly, and she freezes in front of him like a deer caught in headlights. She can feel her heart race, and her body struggles to stay upright. She's still a bit wobbly from the alcohol, her head spinning more with every step. The liquor seems to take full advantage of her weakness, blurring her vision even further. It's like the world around her is spinning, and yet, there he is, Director Han, closing the distance between them. His presence seems to grow larger and larger, his face coming into focus in the midst of her blurry surroundings. It's almost like he's moving toward her in slow motion, and despite the haze, his handsome face is all she can focus on. How odd, right? Before she even knows what's happening, her feet give way, and she stumbles. In an instant, she's falling, her body unable to regain balance. But instead of hitting the ground, she falls directly into his arms. The moment is almost surreal, her world has gone from spinning to being completely still. They're both caught in the embrace, and for a moment, neither of them moves. Sehui's alarmed, her mind racing as she processes what just happened, but strangely enough, she doesn't freak out this time. Her heart is pounding, but there's something different about this fall. Maybe it's the alcohol dulling her reaction, or maybe it's just the way he's holding her, but for some reason, she feels oddly calm. The moment lingers, and despite everything in her mind telling her to pull away, she just stays there, caught in the embrace, trying to make sense of it all. Director Han grins, pointing out that this is the second time he's caught her in his arms. Sehui feels a warm rush to her cheeks, quickly pulling her hands away and trying to create some space. He teases her with a smirk, joking that maybe she has weak ankles or just keeps falling into random men's arms. Sehui, flustered, isn't sure how to respond. He steps a little closer, casually asking if she has some time to spare. She's surprised by the question and explains she's with a group at dinner, so it won't be easy to leave. But he's not discouraged and asks if she could spare just a couple of minutes for something important. Sehui hesitates, still processing the shift in the conversation, but nods. Before she knows it, he's leading her away from the dinner and into a moment that feels like it could change everything. What could he possibly have in mind? Will he make a move? Will this be the beginning of something feisty? As Sehui and Director Han step into the elevator, all she can think about is where exactly this young, handsome man intends to take her and what could he possibly want to discuss. Her mind races with questions. The elevator ride seems to stretch on forever, but they eventually arrive at a different floor. The door opens to reveal a quiet room, and Sehui's alarm bells immediately start ringing. She wasn't expecting this. Director Han steps in front of her, his confident stride never faltering as he moves toward the center of the room. Sehui, still on edge, tries to ask what exactly he's doing and why he brought her here, but before she can get the words out, he cuts her off, telling her that there are too many eyes out there. He gestures toward a seat beside him, offering her to sit next to him. The air in the room feels thick, and Sehui's heart races as she wonders what exactly this is all about. He then asks, with a cunning grin, if she knows who he is. Sehui hesitates for a moment, then answers, saying she knows him as the director, Taehyeong Han. That grin of his widens, almost mischievous, as he leans in slightly, asking how much she really knows about him. But before she can respond, his phone rings, breaking the moment. He picks up the call, and Sehui watches as he casually answers it. The voice on the other end requests his presence back at the dinner, and he agrees, telling them he'll be down soon. But there's a catch, he asks them to hold things off for just 10 more minutes. 10 minutes. All alone with him. What is this really about? What kind of discussion is he planning? The air in the room feels charged, as if something is about to shift. Sehui's mind races. What's going to happen in those 10 minutes? He hangs up the phone and shifts his full attention back to Sehui, locking eyes with her as he asks again how well she knows him. Sehui's pulse quickens, and her fists clench as she responds that she doesn't know him too well. The air between them thickens with tension, and Sehui can't shake the feeling that something's about to change. She senses the anticipation hanging in the room. What's coming next? Only time will tell. Drop a comment if you want to see a part 2. See you next time.